Report the insiders, former top Trump officials who say President Trump is unfit for office, from his handling of the pandemic to foreign affairs and the very core of American democracy. My next guest was inside, quote, the room where it happened, as his book is aptly titled, counseling President Trump on some of the biggest decisions of his presidency. John Bolton, former national security advisor under President Trump, is here with me now. Mr. Ambassador, thanks so much for joining us. First of all, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the fact that the reason we're doing this special is because there's never been anything like this in terms of so many top administration officials saying, after they leave the administration, this president is unfit.
No, I think it's an indication of what the central problem is with the Trump administration. It is in the Oval Office. It's the president himself. Dozens, scores of loyal Americans have tried to work for him and simply been unable to do it.
There's 215,000 deaths and counting from coronavirus in this nation, yet President Trump's own coronavirus infection has apparently changed nothing about his handling of the virus, including he's now back on the campaign trail holding these reckless rallies exposing his own people potentially to the virus. Does that surprise you?
No, it's totally in character. He beat coronavirus. He's a winner, as he always is. And these other people, well, it's too bad, but as he said, that's the way it is. Look, I think the coronavirus crisis is probably the best example for public consumption of why Trump is not fit to be president. For now, close to 10 months, he has never had a strategy. He has never had a clue how he expected to get through this. He's proceeded on an ad hoc fashion. He's had the attention span of a fruit fly with respect to this. The one thing that's kept his attention, where his attention span is infinite, is getting reelected. And that hasn't changed the entire time.
You've been in the room with President Trump when big decisions are being made. Does anyone tell him what he does not want to hear? Is he capable of, if somebody were in the room right now with him and said, you have to stop these rallies, you are risking your own supporters' health, you have to stop berating Dr. Anthony Fauci, he's trying to save lives, you have to come up with a plan, does he just ignore it?
Well, I think he ignores what he doesn't want to hear. I think, again, coronavirus is a good example. In January, February, NSC staff and others were saying you've got a crisis, but he didn't want to hear bad news about Xi Jinping. He didn't want to hear bad news about the Chinese economy. He particularly didn't want to hear bad news potentially for the U.S. economy, which was his ticket to re-election. You know, you're dealing with a president, and you can't treat him like you're lecturing a bunch of high school students. So you do have to be respectful. And I've never seen anybody really be disrespectful to him. But if he doesn't agree with what you're saying, he simply does not take it in.
What do you think a second term of a Trump presidency would look like?
I think he will be utterly unrestricted. I think
he's been restricted?
Well, as I explain in my book, one of the things in the national security space that was critical to getting what I consider to be the right policy judgments was making arguments about the domestic political consequences of making the wrong judgment. Forget the merits of the particular policy. He reacted to the political environment. And once reelected, that political guardrail is substantially reduced, if not eliminated. I think the failed impeachment is another big mistake. He wasn't really restricted by what happened in impeachment. He's not deterred from engaging in that conduct again. The fact he was acquitted empowers him. I think that's a big risk in a second term.
We have no idea what's going to happen, although polls certainly favor Joe Biden right now, but polls are not facts. They're analyses and predictions. If he loses, there's a lot of concern that he's not going to commit to a peaceful transfer of power. He's already trying to claim that the election's being stolen with no evidence of that. Are there any guardrails in the administration? Do you have concerns about General Milley or Secretary Esper or Chief of Staff Meadows? I mean, is there anyone there to say, sir, you lost, you have to leave?
Well, I think the Defense Department is in good hands with Esper and Milley. I have no concerns there as long as they're still in office. But let's be clear. Trump will not leave graciously if he loses. He will not leave graciously. Whether he carries it to the extreme, I don't think we know. I think it's very troubling that he has said, I can't lose unless there's fraud. Of course he can lose in an honest election. And I think this is really on the leadership of the Republican Party, elected officials, private citizens. that if it's clear what the outcome is, it's up to Republicans, not Democrats, to say, this is on us, he's got to go.
Do you have faith in Republican officials that they will step forward and do that? There's not a lot of evidence. I mean, you see individuals like Mitch McConnell who disagree with the president on coronavirus or on election peaceful transfer of power. But there's not a lot of profiles and courage up there.
I've been in touch with a lot of Republican elected officials and others over the past several months. I think they're ready for this moment. I think they can see the president trying to sow confusion and chaos, which is his natural, best operating environment. I don't think they will stand up for it.
Do you think the Trump presidency has done irreparable harm to the United States?
I do not think after 4 years it's done irreparable harm. But the one reason I'm not going to vote for him, and I'm not voting for Biden either, but one reason I'm not going to vote for Trump is that 8 years could cause irreparable injury, both to the U.S. and its international relations, but also to our constitutional system here in the U.S. And I think that's important for people to understand, especially conservatives.
You vote in Maryland, which is a state that's a blue state, a reliably blue state. So the fact that you're not going to vote for Joe Biden, even though you're decidedly not against Trump, doesn't really have a long-term effect, potentially. Do you think you would be different if you lived in a battleground state where your vote might actually make more of a difference if you lived in Virginia or Colorado?
No, because I'm not going to vote against my philosophy. And I just point the example of George Meany, the president of the AFL-CIO in 1972, told Richard Nixon for the first time he wasn't going to vote for George McGovern, wasn't going to vote for Richard Nixon either. But that was what Meany considered to be the principled thing to do, and that's the example I'm following.
But Trump is also against your core philosophies. It's not just the Democrats.
Look, but let's be clear. Trump is not a conservative, and he's not really a Republican. That's why conservatives and Republicans should fear his reelection. It's not going to get better in a second term.
Lastly, sir, your message to any voters out there who are considering voting for Donald Trump, what do you want to tell them? What should they know, given the fact that you were, as your book says, in the room where it happened?
Well, I don't think Trump should get another term. Don't misunderstand. I do think voters in that situation should vote for Republican senatorial candidates to help Republicans keep control of the Senate and be a check against the left wing of the Democratic Party. That's certainly what I'm working to do.
Ambassador John Bolton, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.